I opened the door at the sound of frantic knocking, and Tara, my twin sister, was standing there like she'd just run out of a storm. Her hair was a mess, her jacket crooked, her breath short like someone had backed her into a wall. Her eyes, I'd never seen that look on a face identical to mine. Not sad, not tired, but terrified. "Tara, what happened?" She shook her head and raised a hand like she was begging me not to ask. A tiny gesture, but full of desperation. I pulled her inside. Her hands were cold as ice. Her whole body was tense, and what chilled me most was how she pressed herself against the wall, like she was afraid someone would walk in right behind her. I was about to close the door when I heard a familiar voice from the end of the hallway. "Tara? You came when?" Scott, my husband, stepped into view, and I saw his face freeze when he looked at her. He smiled, but it was stiff, like peeling paint on an old wooden chair. His eyes moved from Tara's face to her shaking hands. "Hey, babe." He said it out of habit, then flinched like he'd said the wrong word. My stomach dropped. Tara shrank the moment she heard that, babe, a reflex so real it couldn't be faked. I looked at the two of them and felt the floor tilt under my feet. "I'm fine," Tara said quietly, her eyes avoiding Scott's. Scott walked toward her, way too close, close enough that I saw Tara grip the edge of her shirt. He put a hand on her shoulder, gentle but claiming. "You okay? If something's wrong, you can tell me." Why did he care about Tara like that? Why did his hand land on her shoulder like it belonged there? Why did Tara tremble just because he stepped near her? The questions hit me one after another, but none had an answer. I brought Tara into the living room. She sat on the couch, but kept her back straight, her hands on her knees like she was trying not to fall apart. I went to get her a glass of water, but when I came back, Scott was already sitting beside her, only a few inches away, way too close for any situation. "Tara, do you need anything?" His voice was strangely gentle. Tara shook her head. No eye contact, no deep breaths, no words. I stepped in and set the glass on the table. Scott looked up at me with a forced smile. "I'm just checking if she's okay." "Thanks," I said, but my eyes were on Tara's hands, clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I hadn't even steadied myself when something else stopped me cold. When I took Tara out to pick up a few things, she forgot her tote bag. I went down to the garage to grab the car, and there it was, her bag sitting inside Scott's car. I froze. Tara hadn't been anywhere with Scott lately. She never left her bag in someone else's car, but it was right there, like Scott had driven her somewhere and I had no idea. I picked up the bag and felt the truth closing in on me. When I got back home, Scott was leaning on the counter, watching Tara like he was trying to read her mind. Tara stared at the floor, gripping her own wrist like she needed it to hold herself together. Scott stepped into the room, and Tara flinched. Just once, but enough. Not from the cold, from him. I saw all of it, every detail, and my heartbeat shifted into the rhythm of a suspicion I could no longer ignore. When Scott went into his office, I sat beside Tara. "Can you tell me what's going on?" Tara opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes reddened, but she didn't cry. She wanted to say something, that much was obvious, but it was like an invisible rope was tightening around her throat. "Tara, are you scared?" I asked. She jolted, and the answer was in that jolt. Scott walked by, and Tara straightened instantly, eyes down like a kid afraid of getting scolded. He asked in his usual tone, "What are you two talking about?" Tara didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on her hands, and I, the person who knew her better than anyone, could tell she was hiding something that was choking the air out of her. I answered for her. "Nothing." Scott looked at me, then at Tara. That look. It wasn't the look of an innocent husband. It had a sharp layer of alertness, like he was watching to see if Tara might slip and say something. The room went cold. That night, when I walked Tara to the guest room to let her rest, I held her hand a little longer than usual. "What were you trying to tell me earlier?" Tara looked at me, her lips trembling. "Mel, Then she shook her head hard, like saying it would make everything collapse, on her and on me. "Tara, I'm your sister. I can handle it." But Tara stepped back, tears falling before she could stop them. "Mel, I can't. Not right now." I looked at her and felt like the whole world was holding a secret that would shatter the second anyone touched it. Tara lay down and turned her back to me, but her shoulders shook nonstop. I stood in the doorway and watched, seeing clearly that she wanted to tell the truth, but her fear was bigger than her need to be free of it. I closed the door with a chill running down my spine. My suspicion had crossed a line. It wasn't something feels off anymore. It was certainty that something terrible was being hidden, something Tara wasn't ready to say, and Scott was trying to cover. That night, I knew my marriage had crossed a point we couldn't return from. The next morning, I had only one option: face it. While Tara slept in the guest room, I sat alone in the living room, staring into the dark like I was standing in front of a door I'd avoided for years. Tara had shown up terrified, but if it were something small, she wouldn't be shaking like that. And if it weren't connected to Scott, she would have told me right away. I asked myself how many signs I'd ignored, and the answers rushed in all at once. Scott had never really been a man I could trust fully. I was just someone who kept trying to. Scott, the man everyone thought was perfect. He was the kind of guy women turned their heads for wherever he went. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that dangerous but charming look. At 40, he still carried himself like a B-list Hollywood actor. Polished, confident, magnetic, even though he didn't really have anything going for him. But behind all that shine was an emptiness only someone living with him could see. He couldn't keep any job for more than 3 months. He loved talking about million-dollar projects, startup ideas, life-changing opportunities, but he never actually started anything. If anyone pushed for details, he always said, "I just need more time. Just trust me one last time." And I believed that one last time far too many times. Scott lived on charm, on smooth talk, on eyes that knew how to make women soften. He didn't have to chase. Women came to him, especially the lonely ones, the newly divorced ones, or the wealthy ones who liked good looks and sweet words. I used to think that meant he was irresistible. Now I understand. It was just proof of how skilled he was at living off whoever loved him, me, the third wife and the third fool. I met Scott when my previous marriage was falling apart. I was tired, worn out, and Scott showed up looking perfect, talking sweet enough to make me believe he was my second chance. I knew he'd been divorced twice, but he told the story in a way that made him sound like the victim. I loved the wrong people. I got used. No one gets me the way you do. I believed him, and I paid for it with years in a marriage I was the only one trying to hold together. The times I caught him cheating. The first time, he was in the shower. His phone lit up on the table with a message, "I can't wait to see you again." It was from a woman older than him and divorced. I confronted him. Scott held me, cried, and swore it was just a mistake, that he'd been tempted. I foolishly believed him. The second time, he said he was going for a run but came home with a strange perfume lingering on his shirt. He said he'd run past someone who'd sprayed too much. I knew it was a lie. But I thought about my kid, about how my family had already fallen apart once, so I said nothing. Then there was another time. He texted me saying his company was having a team-building trip. He said he needed a little money because management required each employee to contribute. I gave it to him. No questions, no doubts. Until a friend sent me a photo of him on a beach, sitting next to a blonde woman. No company shirts, no coworkers, just him and her. I called. Scott said, "You don't trust me? This is a work trip." She just sat next to me. I hung up before I started crying. The worst was when he came home wearing a new button-down, the kind I never bought him because he preferred other styles. When I asked, he said a buddy bought it, but it didn't fit him, so he gave it to me. His voice was a little too relaxed, and the shirt fit him perfectly. I knew, but I let it go, and it kept happening. Again and again. Scott flirted with anyone, my close friends, female coworkers, neighbors, even my cousin. He treated people's loyalty like something cheap, something he could toss aside whenever he wanted. I saw all of it, but I kept telling myself, he'll change. I was wrong. Men like Scott don't change. That kind of cheating instinct was in his bones. That night, when Tara was trembling in my living room, something in me snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was going on. When Scott stepped out, I shut the door and faced Tara. "Tara, I need to ask you honestly, what happened between you and Scott?" Tara broke down immediately. Not the slow, dramatic kind of crying. It was a choked sob, the kind you let out only after holding it in far too long. "Nell, I'm sorry." Those 2 words changed everything in the room. Tara spoke in broken pieces. Scott had been flirting with her for a while. At first, she'd been vulnerable. His sweet talk, the way he knew exactly how to press into the weak spots of a woman who'd just been through heartbreak. She told me she and Scott had crossed a line. She felt awful about it. But the worst part was this. Scott didn't love her. Not at all. He only wanted Tara to help him get access to my accounts. The accounts I'd built for years. Raising my kid, paying debts, keeping our life afloat. He wanted Tara to play the trustworthy one so she could get what he needed from me. Tara's voice shook as she said, I realized Scott doesn't love anyone. He just wants your money. When I refused, he threatened me. He said if I opened my mouth, things would get bad for me, and then bad for you. I went still. Not because Scott cheated. That part wasn't new anymore. But because he dragged my sister into his dirty plans. Tara dropped to her knees, hands covering her face. Mel? I'm sorry. I messed up, but I couldn't let you lose everything, so I told you the truth. I looked at Tara, not as someone who betrayed me, but as another woman Scott had manipulated, the same way he'd manipulated me. I didn't blame her. I couldn't. All I felt was a cold settling in my chest, and then a strange clarity. Scott had crossed the final line. Tara held me and cried like she had nothing left inside to hide. I stood there feeling, for the first time, that I was finally seeing the real face of the man I'd lived with for years. I didn't want to cry anymore. I didn't want to hurt anymore. I just wanted it to end. And right then, I knew I couldn't stay silent one more day. That was the moment I started planning to expose Scott. Not with anger, but with the clear-headed resolve of someone who had endured far too much. The night Tara told me everything, I sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt something inside me finally fall into its right place. The truth. A truth I'd avoided, covered with hope, with empty promises, with all the times I tried to hold our family together for my kid. When I walked into Tara's room, she was sitting on the bed with her knees pulled up, her eyes red but calmer. She looked at me like she was waiting for a verdict, but I only said one thing. We're going to handle this together. Tara brought her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. Maybe she thought I'd walk away. But we're twins. Since we were kids, we got through everything side by side. Scott couldn't break what the two of us had our whole lives. And from that moment on, the plan started to take shape. The two of us started planning to switch places. Tara said right away, if you pretend to be me, he'll show everything. He doesn't suspect you, and he doesn't think I'm strong enough to stand up to him. Then we use that, I said. I spent the whole evening practicing every detail Tara pointed out. How she ties her hair in a low bun, with a few strands falling on each side. How she tilts her head a little when listening, her slightly closed-off walk that makes her seem smaller, her softer voice, the way she ends her sentences, always paired with a shy glance. Tara adjusted every tiny thing. She even took my hands and placed them exactly where she usually holds hers when she's anxious. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw Tara. Not just the appearance. The whole presence. You look frighteningly like me, Tara whispered. I squeezed her shoulder. This is the one time our similarity is going to save us. The next day, I put on Tara's gray t-shirt, the one she usually wore when she came over. I tied my hair exactly like hers, took off my wedding ring, hid anything that belonged to Melissa so only the version of Tara remained. The woman Scott thought he could control. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the door open. Scott walked in, still wearing that annoyed look he always had when I didn't greet him at the door. But when he saw Tara, his entire expression shifted instantly. The smile, the softness in his voice, the slight tilt of his head to seem caring. Tara, you came early? I gave a small smile, just like Tara would. Scott moved closer than necessary, and I saw the difference right away. With Melissa, he kept polite distance when pretending to be decent. With Tara, he leaned in like a man who thought he was about to get something useful. Is Melissa home? Scott asked, but there wasn't a trace of real concern in his voice. I shook my head like Tara. No, I just stopped by for a bit. Scott smiled. Good. One word, and it was enough to send a chill down my spine. It didn't take long before Scott got to his point. Smooth, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in his head a dozen times. Tara, you said the other day that Melissa still uses her old password, right? His voice was light, but his eyes were nothing but calculation. I pretended to hesitate. He smiled again and placed his hand on the back of the chair behind me. I'm only trying to help you. You know how stressed Melissa gets about money. If you could check a few things for her, I think everything would be easier for both of you. I kept Tara's expression on my face, but inside I was boiling. He was using the excuse of protecting me to squeeze money out of me. Scott kept going, his voice dripping with sweetness. Can you check which bank cards she still uses? I remember Mel mentioned she had one she barely touched. Do you know which one? I answered with the same line Tara used whenever she stalled him. I'll check. Scott tilted his head and smiled. You're always the one I can count on. That sentence felt like a slap. He didn't stop there. Scott shifted into the romance part of his script. Tara, he said softly like he was confessing love, when everything's settled, I want to take you somewhere. Somewhere nice, like Cancun or Hawaii. I almost laughed. It was the same line he'd used on me when he wanted money for that company trip. Scott kept going, all dreamy and sincere. We deserve a fresh start. I'm tired of Melissa. She doesn't understand me. Only you do. The same words, the same tone, the same script he used on every woman he planned to use. If Tara played along, he'd drain my accounts. If Tara pulled back, he'd run back to me begging, just like he always had. To Scott, women were nothing but funding sources. A few hours later, Scott brought his phone over and held it close to my face, like we were some kind of secret couple. I just texted you, he said. His phone buzzed. A message popped up. You're the best thing I have. If I have you, I don't need anyone else. I took his phone and saw the message thread he'd been sending Tara for days. Sweet talk. Selfies showing off. I'm hitting the gym to get ready for our future. Promises of gifts. Complaints about me. About how I don't understand him. Scott didn't realize Tara wasn't replying because Tara had cut him off completely. He thought she was being emotional, so he pushed even harder. I scrolled through every line and felt like my own life from the outside. And it was shameless. As the afternoon faded, Scott leaned back on the sofa and looked at me with a satisfied smile. He placed his hand on my knee, giving it a small squeeze like it was something he'd earned. Tara, I need you on my side. If you help me this time, I promise no one will ever hurt you again. I looked up at him, and in that moment, I no longer saw the man I once loved. All I saw was a good-looking shell, empty on the inside, living off the affection and money of anyone gullible enough to trust him. I nodded slightly, still in character as Tara, but inside me, something else opened up. I finally understood. Scott didn't just cheat on me. He built his entire life on using women, and this time, the victim wasn't me or Tara. This time, he was up against the real me. The plan to expose him was ready. From the day I started pretending to be Tara, Scott turned into a different person. Not different with me, different with the version of himself he always performed in front of Melissa. With Tara, he didn't have to hide. He didn't have to act like a good husband or pretend to be responsible. He could just be who he really was, a man who flirted, manipulated, and took whatever he could. Every morning, Scott texted Tara, I miss you. Meet me today, just us. As if I were the one he truly loved. As if I weren't his actual wife. As if Tara, my twin sister, was the future he dreamed of. He kept asking to meet alone, sometimes in his office, sometimes in the car, sometimes in the backyard. Whenever I sat down, he'd sit close enough for our shoulders to touch. He'd place his hand on my back, sliding it lightly like he had the right. Tara, he whispered, I'm tired of this life, of Melissa, of pretending to be moral, responsible. You're the only one who gets me. I swallowed down the wave of nausea rising in my throat. Tara had told me that line before. Turns out it was the one Scott recycled for any woman he wanted to win over. One afternoon, the air went still like it was warning of a storm. Scott and I, with me playing Tara, were sitting in the living room. He let out a deep sigh, then leaned his elbows onto his knees, head bowed like some exhausted, broken man. I need to be honest with you, Tara. Melissa suffocates me. She only complains, criticizes, judges. I've lived with someone like that long enough. My heart clenched, but I kept Tara's look on my face. Quiet, hesitant, sympathetic. Scott kept going, his voice smooth as melted sugar. You're different. You're gentle, soft. You don't force me to be someone else. You understand me. I want to leave Melissa. I just need her finances sorted out a little. Then I'll do it. I turned to him, trying to let my eyes tremble the way Tara's did. Finances, meaning, what do you want? Scott looked at me with a sharpness that exposed every ounce of his greed. I need your help. You know which cards Melissa uses, which passwords, or how to check her accounts, right? Just checking, that's all. Once everything is settled, I can leave with you. No looking back. Every word he spoke was a needle popping the last bit of illusion I'd ever held about him. His future was nothing but a shiny cover for his plan to drain me. In the days that followed, Scott grew impatient. He pushed harder. Tara, tell me which bank Melissa uses. You said she changed her password, remember? If you can get into her account, even just to check the balance, that's enough. He tried to sound gentle, but the urgency showed in the wrinkle between his brows. At times, he gripped my wrist, light enough to seem intimate but firm enough to send a message. You need to cooperate. He pulled his chair closer, speaking in a low voice. I need you to move faster. This is our chance to get away from Melissa. If you stall, everything falls apart. I lowered my face, not because I was acting, but because I needed to hide the anger rising so fast I feared it would show. At dinner time, when Melissa wasn't home, Scott launched into a list of complaints about me. She blows everything out of proportion. She's weak, tired, not worthy of me. I have to carry everything. I'm the one being used. I listened and felt a sharp, burning sting move through my whole body. He talked about me like I was dead weight. Like I hadn't been the one raising our child, paying our debts, holding the family together, forgiving him over and over. Scott didn't know Tara was me, Melissa, watching every lie spill out of his mouth. He didn't know every word he said was killing the last drop of respect I had left for him. He sent a flood of messages to me that night. If Melissa keeps clinging to her money, I can't take it anymore. Do you understand how much I need you? Tara, I love you. Love, spoken as lightly as a breath he could hand to anyone. One day in the kitchen, Scott stood behind me, his hand on my waist. He leaned in and whispered, You look so much like Melissa. Sometimes I can't tell the difference. Then he laughed. But that's a good thing. One gives me stability, the other gives me excitement. Two women who look the same, but only one makes me happy. I froze, my whole body turning cold. Not because the words were disgusting, though they were, but because they revealed the most frightening truth. Scott didn't love a person. Scott loved the feeling of controlling two versions of the same woman. He didn't choose Melissa or Tara. He chose power. That night, Scott pulled me into his office and closed the door. He sat down in front of me, gripping the chair like a man about to confess something heavy. Tara, we need to move fast. Can you ask Melissa for some information? I can't wait much longer. I pretended to shrink back. What if Melissa finds out? Scott's expression changed instantly. Softness turned sharp. Tara. His voice dropped so low the whole room seemed to tighten. Don't make me do something I don't want to do. The threat wasn't spelled out, but it was enough for me to understand exactly how scared Tara must have been around him. I looked straight at the man I once loved, and for the first time, I saw nothing but darkness. When I walked out of his office, I didn't want to act anymore. I didn't want to be gentle, or scared, or the fragile woman he thought he could use. I wanted it to end. I wanted to stand in front of Scott as me. No more Tara, no more pretending, no more disguise. I wanted him to look into my eyes and see everything he'd done. I wanted him to know his plan fell apart the moment he awakened the last bit of strength I had left. I stood in front of the mirror and loosened the bun. My hair fell over my shoulders, heavy but freeing. I looked at myself, no longer the blind wife, no longer the exhausted mother, no longer the woman who forgave without limits. I was Melissa, the one who would end it. And I knew, tomorrow morning, Scott would face me, not Tara. I walked downstairs that morning with my hair loose over my shoulders. No Tara bun, no timid posture, no soft fluttery voice. Just me, Melissa. The woman Scott thought he could fool forever. Scott was at the dining table, phone in hand, probably texting Tara again. When he looked up and saw me, his expression shifted. Not to surprise, to confusion. Melissa, you're home already? His voice sounded like someone scrambling to put a mask back on. I stood straight in front of him. Tara's not coming today, but if you want to talk to her, you might want to choose your words more carefully. She's hearing everything. Scott set his phone down fast. Mel, you misunderstood. I was only trying to help Tara. She's fragile. Stop talking, I said quietly, coldly. I know everything. Every word you said, every message you sent, every time you asked her for my account information, every promise you made about leaving me for my own sister. Scott's face went pale. No, Tara misled me. You don't understand. I was stressed, confused. I laughed, a laugh I didn't even recognize as mine. Stop lying. I'm the one you've been flirting with for a whole week, not Tara. Scott shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. What? No, that's impossible. Tara, you? Enough, Scott. My voice was steady enough to freeze him where he stood. Right then, the bedroom door opened. Tara stepped out. For the first time, her eyes didn't shake, didn't look away, didn't hold fear. She looked straight at Scott. You used me. I was vulnerable. I made mistakes. But you took advantage of that to get to my sister's money. You said you loved me, but you only loved Melissa's bank account. Scott shook his head over and over like he thought if he shook hard enough, the truth would disappear. Tara, what are you talking about? I care about you. I really do. Tara let out a laugh, the most painful sound I've ever heard. You don't care about anyone, Scott. You only care about who can bankroll you next. Scott looked at me, then at Tara, then down at the table like he was about to collapse. Mel, you can't believe her, right? I'm your husband. I love you. I stepped back. You've never loved anyone. You only love the feeling of being taken care of by women. I placed the divorce papers on the table. Sign them. I'm not living one more day with a man who sees women as walking wallets. Scott stared at the papers, his lips trembling. Mel, please. I've lost everything. I don't have a job anymore. My friends won't talk to me. If you leave too, I'll have nothing. I looked straight at him. That's the result of your own choices, not mine. He dropped into a chair, head in his hands. Please. You don't understand. I need you. I need someone. I can't be alone. I took a deep breath. You should have thought about that before you destroyed everything. Here is your translation into natural American English, keeping the structure exactly as you wrote. After the divorce, I cut off all financial support. Tara blocked him too. His mother refused to take him in because of all the debt he'd created in the past. And something I didn't expect happened. The women who'd been involved with Scott started messaging me. Thank you for getting out. You did the right thing. He came to me asking for money again. I said no. Everyone can finally see who he really is. Scott tried going back to every woman from his past. The divorced one, the widowed one, the older woman who used to fall for him. Every single one blocked him. No one wanted to go back to the man who had made them victims. No one wanted to support a 40-year-old who lived off sweet talk. No one wanted to be tied to someone who only knew how to lie. In the end, Scott was left alone. No money, no home, no woman willing to stay beside him, no one believing his sweet words anymore. His mask finally fell off completely. Tara and I stepped out of Scott's shadow together. The two of us became the way we used to be, before that man ever came between us. Here is your full translation into natural American English, keeping the structure exactly as you wrote and preserving the YouTube-style narration. One afternoon, we were sitting on the porch, drinking tea, watching my child play. Tara said softly, Mel, I've never seen you this strong. I leaned back in my chair. Not stronger, I just don't ever want to lose myself again. Looking back on my marriage, I see it clearly now. I was trying to hold on to something that was never real. I thought forgiving someone over and over would make them change. But really, I was the one disappearing. Now I know this. I didn't need to beat Scott. I just needed to stand up and walk away. I watched the late afternoon light fall across my hands and smiled. When the truth comes out, someone who lives on lies will eventually drown in them. And I didn't rise because I won anything. I rose because I finally knew my worth. That's the end of the story. Thank you for spending your time listening to this chaotic but awakening journey of Melissa and Tara. If you were Melissa in this story, how would you face it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear what you think. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you in the next video.